So there was a small hotfix for Helldivers yesterday that fixed a few pretty solid issues in the game, notably with Leviathans, which is what this video is mainly going to be about, but also these two issues where they fixed the stim melee bug that I mentioned in last week's video, so you can start using your stun batons again. But they also fixed another stimming bug when you used a stim in an emplacement and then you got off and your guns turned sideways, or you were on an emplacement and then afterwards you were unable to shoot your gun. It's because you stimmed while on it, but luckily now that is fixed. So I wanted to point those two out because those are some great fixes and they were causing some people some annoyances last week. So now those two things are fixed. But let's talk about the Leviathan changes. They made the guns shootable. They did a number of things to them, and I tested out a bunch of different stuff. And I also tested out like how much damage the Leviathan deals to you and whatnot, and formulated some thoughts on it. But getting into the changes themselves, we could see right here, they said, "We have heard your feedback and are attempting to balance Leviathans to more manageable levels. The Leviathans no longer cause Ragdoll and deal less impulse damage to vehicles. They adjusted the spawn rates so you encounter less permission. They also added a 1-second delay between shots for target locking. And then finally, Leviathan cannons can now be destroyed." So I did test about how much health they have and about how durable they are. I won't know exactly until the data mine stats come out, but I did some pretty in-depth stuff with that. And I also want to talk about the Ragdoll and what the Leviathan enemy is. But first of all, let's just talk about the quick changes that I can pretty much summarize. Now, first up is the spawn rates. I will say I did not notice less spawning. I'm on difficulty 10. Maybe these changes were more so for lower difficulties. I don't know. It feels about the same. Last patch, it pretty much felt like there was always a Leviathan on my screen. And this patch, when I was going in to do these test matches, there was always a Leviathan around for me to test, and if there wasn't, there was usually one flying in the distance. So maybe this change was more so for lower difficulties. Let me know if you play like difficulty 7 and you noticed a lot less spawning in. Personally, I don't mind if more or less spawn. I care more so about the other major changes. But I will say, I'm just letting you guys know, if there is actually less this patch and I just didn't notice, there's still pretty much always a Leviathan presence. Again, if there wasn't one immediately nearby, I always noticed one lurking around or flying in the distance. Okay, and the second thing is when it comes to vehicle damage, the Emancipator exosuit still feels very fragile. I'm pretty sure they can burst it down in like 3 shots, and the Leviathan shoots 4 shots at a time. But when I was driving the car, it felt like as long as I was moving, I wouldn't die. Now the car seems to be able to live about 5 or 6 shots. I'm not sure if this is even more or less than the last patch. I know the first patch, it totally one-shot cars if it got a direct hit on it. But even after they just nerfed the damage of it last patch, I thought the cars felt a lot more viable. Just being able to drive around, like occasionally it would hit near you and do some splash damage to your tires, but as long as it doesn't hit you directly, it won't one-shot your FRV. Okay, so those were just the 2 smaller changes I wanted to summarize. Now, before we get into the major changes, I do actually have a sponsored segment for this video. I want you guys to know I tested a lot of weapons against the cannons, and mostly I'm going to give you my overall thoughts on that, as well as what I think the Leviathan should be. But first, let's just shout out our sponsor, Instant Gaming, the awesome video game website that I've been working with. Use my link in the description so they know that I sent you over here to get a video game that you were looking for. You can get Helldivers 2 for a friend for $10 off what it is in Steam. You could go play an old but gold game like Titanfall 2. They often have these really old games for just a few dollars, even though these could be a lot more on Steam, and plenty of other options. I know Dune Awakening just came out, and Instant Gaming has it for 20% off. And keep in mind, these are regional prices, so these are like the US prices. It may be different pricing depending on what region you're in. Check out Instant Gaming in the description. I have worked with them for many, many months now and use my link so that way they know that I sent you. All right, so first things first, the cannons on the Leviathans are shootable now. You can actually destroy them. Now, we don't have the data mine stats for them yet, but I have a pretty good ballpark estimate of how much health they have. Now, the real thing, is it even worth shooting off these cannons, or, like how much health do they have? And basically, how did I figure this out? So first of all, they are heavy armor. Basically, no primary weapons are going to be able to deal with them. Now, you could technically shoot them with an eruptor or a senator, but I will just tell you right now that the cannons are actually fairly tanky and durable. So the eruptor projectile or the senator is not going to deal with them in a fast manner at all. I think these things are basically as tanky as Bile Titan heads. So I first tested out the autocannon because it does 260 heavy armor pen damage on the projectile, and it also deals 260 durable. So, using the autocannon first will just give me a baseline for how much health it has, no matter what the durability it is, because no matter what, it deals its damage to it. Now, this took 10 shots from the autocannon, so keep in mind there is an armor match penalty when you're shooting heavy armor against heavy armor, so that is 65% of the total damage. The autocannon is dealing 169 damage to it, not accounting for any fall-off damage. And actually, someone in the comments down below, let me know if autocannon has fall-off damage, because I believe it has a little bit, like similar to the AMR, but for some reason in my head, I can't remember. So anyways, 10 shots of the autocannon means it has somewhere around 1,690 health, and it could technically have as low as 1,500 health. If I had to put a ballpark on it, I would say it's probably around 1,600 or 1,650 health on the cannons. Now, the other thing is I wanted to figure out how durable they were, so I tried the AMR next, which deals 450 damage heavy armor pen, but only 180 durable. So notice the AMR deals almost double the base damage of the autocannon, but it actually deals less durable damage. So using the AMR after the autocannon, if it takes less shots to kill the cannons, then the cannons aren't durable. But if it takes more shots to kill the cannons, then they are pretty durable. And when I tested it, the AMR consistently took 13 shots. 3 more shots than the autocannon. Again, not accounting for fall-off damage. But this is what let me know that these cannons are pretty durable, because if we take the AMR's durable damage of 180 and multiply it by 0.65, you get 117. And now 117 times 13 shots equals 1,521. Now, this isn't quite 1,600 health, so my best ballpark for these cannons, and keep in mind this is a guesstimate, but it is probably pretty close, is that the cannons are about 1,600 health and about 90% durable. Now, I came to 1,600 health and 90% durable because that makes sense for 10 autocannon shots, but then it also lines up perfectly with about 13 AMR shots. Now, again, this is just a ballpark. In general, these turrets are fairly tanky, even for AP4 weapons. They're very similar to the Bile Titan's head in health. I think just slightly tankier than a Bile Titan's head. And a Bile Titan's head takes like 9 autocannon shots and about 2 magazines from the AMR. So again, it's very close, very similar to a Bile Titan head. Now, another thing as well is that this sort of health value also lines up with our anti-tank weaponry, because these cannons are one-shottable by the Quasar cannon, which deals 2,000 damage, AP6, and that is the same damage as the EAT. And again, with a Bile Titan head is one-shottable by Quasar or EAT. And this also automatically means that the recoilless rifle will one-shot these cannons as well, because the recoilless does 3,200 damage. And similarly, the anti-tank emplacement and the commando will both two-shot them. The anti-tank emplacement deals 1,300 damage, and the commando is 1,100 damage. So this kind of just all lines up with these cannons being ever so slightly tankier than a Bile Titan head. I do think one thing worth mentioning is that, like, the recoilless rifle just flat out kills a Leviathan in 6 shots, but you can pretty much fully disarm them in 4, because if they don't have any of the cannons on them, they're pretty much just gone until they fly off the map and then a new one respawns. Now, another thing worth mentioning is that if you shoot these cannons, it deals no damage to the main body. So if you're using the recoilless rifle, you probably want to shoot the wings off, and I'm pretty sure you can shoot these wings off in 2 shots anyway, so you don't even need to try to be accurate and hit the small cannon with the recoilless rifle. Just shoot 2 at the wing and you get both of the cannons on that wing anyway. Now, in general, I will just first list off the weapons, because I tested a lot of the weapons. I will tell you guys the ones that felt good to kill them with, in my opinion, and I'll be playing some clips of the other weapons in the background as I'm just talking about the Leviathan changes. So first thing is that the HMG actually takes half a magazine to rip them off, which felt very solid, being able to basically get 2 cannons off per magazine. Now, of course, if you took your time and shot 1 at a time, maybe you could technically push it to like a 3rd one per magazine. But in general, I just stuck it on low RPM and then kind of full autoed one until it was off. And I got it off in half a mag. Maybe it'll even take you like 3/4 of a mag. But that seems pretty solid. If you have a second, to be able to do this if your teammate is fighting a swarm and a Leviathan flies over top and you can get one of the cannons on one side off, or maybe like your teammate can get the other cannon on that side off. I don't think this is the best option, but I was just surprised that it only took half a mag from an HMG. Now the railgun is the next gun worth mentioning. The railgun is taking them off in 3 full charge shots or 6 safe shots, which again is just kind of solid in my opinion. I haven't played much railgun on squids because when the faction came out, it just immediately seemed like it was not going to be one of the best options. But the railgun can safe shot overseer heads off. And I think you can also do a safe shot to rip like their chest or leg armor off, and then another quick shot to finish them off from there. I probably will try out the railgun a bit more against squids because it's pretty cool taking off the cannons pretty quickly with the railgun. But to be honest with you guys, I'm not sure if this one's even worth bringing. Now, finally, the anti-tank emplacement is definitely the best way if you just want to deal with Leviathans. It kills all the cannons in 2 shots. It does it very fast, and it also has a very nice zoom to aim for it as well, because realistically, these cannons are pretty small and they're a minimum of 100 meters away at all times. It's a pretty small target, and with the anti-tank emplacement zoom, you can pretty much get a much easier shot against them. And then you can basically disarm a whole Leviathan with only 8 ammo. And that means you could technically deal with 3 Leviathans with 1 anti-tank emplacement. I think it takes, 13 shots to fully kill a Leviathan. So, like, this is like a buff to the anti-tank emplacement against Leviathans, because last patch, you could fully kill 2 Leviathans with 1 anti-tank emplacement, but this patch, you could disarm 3 with 1 anti-tank emplacement. So, it made it better by 1. And in general, it doesn't feel worth it to shoot them. Even when I brought, like, recoilless some games, by the time I would go to shoot a Leviathan, and I, like, damaged one of the wings off, it was already flying away anyway. Sometimes it does feel very good to kill them, but a lot of the times, by the time you end up starting to kill them, they're flying away anyway. So now what I was curious about was, how do Leviathans feel now that they're not ragdolling you anymore? I tested all kinds of different armors against them, and it seems like they can still one-shot you if the projectile directly hits you. In the last patch, they said the projectile did 350 damage, which means it will one-shot any armor. But I was curious about the line about dealing less damage to vehicles, so I did try this out again, and it just seemed like if it ever directly hit me, I always died no matter what armor I was wearing. Now, how often do they directly hit you? It's like a hit or miss. Like, they're pretty inaccurate. I would say like 1 out of 10 shots, maybe it'll directly hit you. But that can stack up like game to game, because like if you're out in the open and you're just completely ignoring a Leviathan and not paying attention, there is a good chance it'll eventually directly hit you. You definitely should be aware of them, and you do have to move from cover to cover still. Now, on top of that, they do often shoot near you and deal a lot of splash damage to you, so they are wearing down your stims. And another thing as well is if they land like 3 really, really quick shots, all really close to you, they can just kill you almost instantly. Like, I do feel like you do have a second to react and dive away and stim, but they can kill you if they just like shoot near you 3 times in a row with the splash damage. So I do want to say it probably is an option to wear some explosive resistance armor, because that will make it so that the splash damage will never kill you. Unless you're just being careless, or unless you were on 1 HP from a different enemy and then it just finished you off. Now, in my opinion, for what it's worth, this is a good change for what these weapons are. You know, the Leviathan is a flying cringe turret bunker that just had 4 cringe turrets on it, and a ton of them would spawn and ragdoll you like crazy, and it was extremely annoying. So, you know, instead of cringe turrets, they basically just have turrets now. And when it's this kind of enemy, like, it's either going to be the extremely cringe ragdoll version or something that people are going to say is gutted now. Now, personally, I don't think they're gutted, because you do have to still be mindful of them. You do still want to be behind cover, because they will directly hit you if you are really just flat out ignoring them out in the open. You can't just completely ignore them, in my opinion, and they do wear down your stims otherwise. Now, in my opinion, I think the Leviathan should just get some new weapons. 1 harvester laser on each wing would look extremely cool and thematic, and it could be the way that they went Scorched Mars. You know, remember Mars on the galactic map that just got scorched during a cutscene? How else did the squid scorch Mars? Like, you know, we could say they set sent like 100,000 Leviathans with laser beam and just drove their beams over it, just scorching the planet. That could be super cool and a little lore tidbit, and I think it would make sense that way. And then let's say we put a bubble barrage below it, because they do actually have a bubble bomb that they shoot below them, which you may not see very often. But like, you know, if it flies directly over you, it drops a ton of these bubbles. You have to evacuate the area, and maybe it gets like a cooldown on it. And that way, if you shoot the laser beams out on the wings, you know, you do still have to be mindful of positioning and flee if they're gonna fly right above you. Now, for what it's worth, I also think that the cannons on the current one, or the laser beams in my example, on the Leviathan should honestly be unarmored. I think there's a problem with flying enemies in this game that I learned with gunships a long time ago, is that when you have a flying enemy that's completely heavily armored, you're extremely limited in what you can use on it, because we don't really have any stratagems that work on flying enemies. So when you make like a heavily armored enemy, basically we're locked into like support weapons or turrets or emplacements, and that's pretty much all that really seems to work. And the Leviathans are not only anti-tank armor, but they're also just the healthiest enemy in the game by far. Like oftentimes when I'm shooting one down, like by the time I almost kill it, I feel like it's flying away already and I just wasted a bunch of time. Now, someone actually mentioned in a live stream yesterday, like, why don't they have shields like the other Illuminates? So like, I actually think you could make a version of a Leviathan that was light armor or even medium armor, body, and like way less tanky, but it's shielded, and that way like everyone can help shoot down the shield, and then maybe like a dude with a support weapon. At that point, I think they could even be heavy armor, but the anti-tank armor feels a little bit bad. Now, in my example here with the Leviathan with the laser beams, I think that you could make these laser beams about the health of like a flesh mob and the same armor, so like unarmored, but just like a bunch of HP. This way, every player on the map can help spam these lasers out when, you know, it's shooting at your teammates, or like whoever is available to be shooting at laser beams in the sky whenever they're not swarmed by enemies. You will need assistance from teammates burning these lasers out. And they wouldn't be pushovers at all, because again, they are flying. There's a really limited things to be able to deal with these. The current flesh mobs are super tanky, and the only reason they're easy to deal with is because I have pyrotech grenades, or I have napalm, or I just have things that like way more options for actual flesh mobs. If the Leviathan laser in the sky was unarmored and 6,000 health, like whatever the flesh mob is, it would not even necessarily be easy to deal with. And once again, like when you do disarm a Leviathan, it flies off and another one flies in all the time. So I really don't think it's that big of a deal. And this sort of enemy would actually provide a lot more interaction, telegraphs, and counterplay. And those are the things that I think makes the game more fun. And like, dude, you can't tell me that this version of the Leviathan wouldn't be deadly. Like, I think people saying like, oh, they nerfed Leviathans, they made the game easier now, is like a little bit ridiculous, because like what I just proposed would be really difficult in my opinion, but it would be way cooler. And I think a lot more people would like it. I think a lot of people like stingrays, but imagine if, and Pip said this the other day, imagine if they took the telegraph off the stingray, if it didn't have that purple beam on the floor. You would hate stingrays all of a sudden. And hey, even I still die to stingrays sometimes when they catch me off guard, or if there's like 3 of them flying in the sky. And at the very least, they reposition me and let other enemies kill me. But like I said, if the option is between what we had before versus what we have now, like, you know, the option before being a cringe turret and the option now just being a regular turret, I think these are good changes, and I choose what we have now. You know, they do still damage you and kill you and wear down your stims as you're playing. But as of right now, it's really just a weather effect that you mostly want to hide from until they pass over. And it's sort of just something that means you constantly have to be moving and constantly be having to look for cover. It's sort of like a modifier that just kind of impacts how you play a little bit differently. In general, I really don't see the point of shooting Leviathans. I know it can be fun to go hunting for them with recoilless rifles, but I think the way the Leviathans fly in, mess with you, and fly away, I think the devs kind of made them like this on purpose because they know it's the only anti-tank enemy on the squids, and they didn't want to require anti-tank in your loadouts against squids. So they made it so that the main strategy was to run away from them. And I just think it's a bit mismatch on identity of what this faction is. But if they brought the actual armor levels down, that, you know, they wouldn't even have to make them fly away. They could make one stick around for a little bit longer and like do like a big circle around the city while it comes back to you and tries to fly over you again. And then by the time you get the lasers off, maybe that's when it flies away and then a new one comes in. So again, these are good changes. I would rather have this than what we had last patch, but I do hope to see more with this enemy in the future. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. See you guys next time. I'm out.